Quit the 9 to 5 with Ben Handler, getting you out of the rat race and into a career buying property.
Welcome back. Great to be with you again. I'm Ben's co-host, Alex Whitlock. Ben, great to see you again.
Yeah, awesome as always to be here.
Here we are again, and we're going to sort of get stuck into looking at some different facets of the property buying game. And that brings me around to introducing a really special guest today, Brady Yoshia. She is now the principal of Belle Property Advisory. Brady has a really sort of rich background in terms of business. So started out on the corporate side, moving into real estate sales, and now taking all her experience into property buying. I mean, that started originally with yourself at Cohen Handler about 5 years ago, but now sort of taking that into Belle Property. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So before we sort of have a look back over your sort of time, perhaps, at Cohen Handler, what's the role now that you have with Belle Property? What are you developing there?
So we're developing a buyer's agency within the Belle umbrella. So it's a completely separate business. It's not linked to the selling side of things. It's essentially a buyer's agency. And I'm building a team whereby we are a very strong, ethical team full with a lot of experience in terms of going out into the marketplace and buying properties.
So we're having a really sort of a chat before we came through here. And you'd sort of touched on something which is quite interesting, that we're sort of in some ways heading towards a US market. And for those that aren't familiar with the US market, it's really sort of common practice to have two sides of the real estate equation. You have a buyer's agent and you have a sales agent. So it's quite interesting that Belle's taken that step forward to start to develop that.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm finding that more and more people are very interested in working with a buyer's agent. And from the perspective of going to open homes and seeing more and more buyer's agents around, it's creating a lot more awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just interested at this point to look at I guess your journey from the corporate side, and am I allowed to say the organisation you worked for? Yes. Originally, you were Optus in training?
Correct, yes.
So what took you into real estate? There's obviously something which took you into real estate on a sales side, first of all. What was the journey there?
So the journey there was that I wanted to have my own business. I wanted to have independence. So I felt that a career in real estate would give me that opportunity. So therefore, at the time, it was just the only opportunities were in sales. So I started to learn the ropes from there. And a fantastic opportunity came to join Cohen Handler. And then that was it. That gave me a time where I could have my own business, have my own independence, but be linked with a very good brand.
That's I think it's a wonderful journey. And look, the three of us at one stage or another have made the move from being an employee to being running our own business. Just for our listeners, these are people who are thinking about taking this move and moving into a wonderful area, which is buyers, being a buyer's agent. Can you just sort of tell me what, at that point, from going from a really secure and very high-profile corporate job into taking really, your sort of career in your own hands and moving into that sort of self-employed, self-directed sort of move? How did you feel when you took that move?
So mixed emotions. It was quite scary, but also very exciting because I knew the sky is the limit. And for me, it was taking a couple of steps back just to take a lot of steps forward. And also being a single mother, it's quite daunting.
Wow.
But I felt that here's the opportunity to create a career whereby I can provide a wonderful financial lifestyle for my children and even for myself.
Ben, just to bring you in at this point, so when did you and Brady first meet up, and what was the journey with yourself?
I think we first met when Brady did come to Cohen Handler, so that was, I think, 5 years ago. And I mean, first I want to acknowledge Brady because obviously she's been on a remarkable journey. So starting out at Cohen Handler, she was a phenomenal buyer's agent, was really involved in the business and growing parts of Cohen Handler across the northern precinct of where she was operating. And then making that move and the transition into where she is now, Belle Property Advisory, was, one could say, could be quite risky. Why? Yeah. Because people, as Brady was saying earlier, may confuse and think, well, it's under Belle. Is that a conflict? And aren't they real estate agents? So I think this move is a phenomenal move for the industry. And I think it comes down to the customer, not what people think. And if the customer comes into the Belle brand and doesn't want to work with a real estate agent anymore for whatever reason, and wants independence, how phenomenal that a company like Belle now can provide that service, what the customer wants. And I think that's where it's going.
I think absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm a huge advocate and a believer in buyer's agent. I've bought many investment properties as using a buyer's agent. And again, when we were sort of catching up, I also used a buyer's agent to buy my own home. And it's quite an interesting concept because I think, with an investment property, you have that level of detachment. There is still, there's I think the research element for an investment property is probably greater because it is an investment rather than that emotive connection with somewhere where you want to live and bring up a family. But I decided that for buying my own home, which was in 2012, that I wanted to use, my trusted buyer's agent to act on my behalf. It was a really good position because I was able to detach myself from the sales agent. So myself and my wife went along and had a look at the property. But having a trusted buyer's agent then to step in to present me as being a credible and serious buyer, but without that kind of sort of connectivity with me, actually sort of being involved in doing that. So I think, it's a critical role in terms of purchasing property. Now, whether it's associated with Belle Property, for purchasing your own home or, sort of moving into, sort of investment markets, I think, it's an important thing to have. I think also in terms of the agency, look, I know Belle Property very well. They are a highly respected brand. And I think that most buyers know that there is a detachment between whether you're a sales agent or whether you're a buyer's agent. So I think it's a great move forward for the industry. Yeah,
and I think it's changing. And a lot of people don't like change and people fear change, and I think that's just typical human behaviour. But, Brady, I think, is at the forefront of that, what's going on now, and leading that. And who knows where the other, big other franchise groups are going to follow. I mean, a lot of them might start to integrate and start realising that things are changing.
I think it's also worth pointing out that I'm very familiar with real estate, and you've got big real estate groups have mortgages as well as a sales side of things. And you could argue it's quite simple to see that there may be a conflict there, but there is a good level of detachment. And again, I think, sort of ethics and sort of the value in the brand are really important. And I think all the big agencies now have this, service where they can help you with a mortgage. They can also help you with the sale. So it's very logical. They can also help you with the purchasing side of things.
Yeah.
Brady, just looking at, so you started in April of last year.
Yes.
So how have you gone sort of selecting people to work alongside you that reflect your ethics and level of approach to being a buyer's agent?
So that's a very good question. I've been looking at people that are very passionate about property, number one, that know what they're talking about. They are licensed professionals. And I've also been looking at people who have not only been buyer's agents before, so it's giving people opportunities. One of my buyer's agents was in the fitness industry before and wanted to change direction, which has been very exciting for him. Then there's another agent who was a selling agent for 13 years and felt that it was time for a change. So I've been looking for people across the board having the right attitude and the right ethics.
I'm going to touch on something which occurs to me, which is really critical. If you're interested in a career in real estate, and sales is a fantastic area to go into. However, one of the things that appeals to me about being a buyer's agent is you are really not constricted by current market conditions. And I think, for those that are listening in and thinking about real estate as a career, right now it's tough for sales agents because if you're in a particular market area and it's a buyer's market as such, you're limited by the stock in your area, you're limited by your own geographic area, and it's great when the sun's shining and when the market's booming. I think the real big thing of taking a career as being a buyer's agent is you're really unshackled because you operate for buyers across all areas, maybe in your local threshold, but you operate nationwide.
That's right. We operate nationwide and we help first home buyers, we help people building their property portfolios, people upsizing, expats, people moving from interstate, also people that are not sure about which way to go, i.e. buying in their self-managed super funds. So we're helping so many people across so many areas.
And you said that you'd got somebody from a sort of a fitness background. There's clearly traits in that person that you see.
And I might just add that this person did Ben's course.
Okay.
And
that's what I was going to...
The course was amazing.
Yeah.
And I have to say, from my perspective, looking in, it gave him such a great ground work in terms of understanding what you need to do, where you need to be, and how you make it happen.
And I think this is what Ben is doing is so important, because there is this groundswell towards. I think in Australia there's a real sort of interest in real estate as a profession and as a career, but there is just this real groundswell and this real awakening to the opportunity to go into the buyer's agency side as opposed to the sales side, and having the opportunity to be educated, to understand sort of the nuances of what's required, I think is really critical. What do you typically find, Ben, as you have people approaching you going through this path, and the person who's working with Brady, what are the sort of fundamentals that you're teaching them?
You know, I've repeated this before, but I think, buying property, I do think in the whole buyer's agent ecosystem is one of the more easy parts of the role. There's so much data available online. If you're doing investment, there's so many good research places, and, it can get quite confusing because there's so much research now. And trying to work out values of properties can be challenging at times, but once you start to understand your market area, you can start to gauge that pretty quick. So I guess to answer the question, my program is really focused on what the real estate licenses don't teach, which is building a business. And there's no surprise why so many small businesses fail in the first 2 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, because they're not taught critical skills, which is around marketing, which is around, lead generation, which is around building your business, which is around building your team, which is around managing your team, which is around, customer service. All the critical areas that I feel like aren't taught for people before they jump into the seat, I really cover in the program.
That's really, really important. And I also work around mortgage broking, which is, sort of a highly valued service. But you know what? Brokers are really, really bad at generating referrals. I think there is something in a lot of people, even when you've done a good job and you've had a happy customer, there's just something that's sort of, it's a bit of a gap between actually coming along and saying, hey, look, if you appreciate what I've done for you, my business is based on referrals. If you can refer me to X, Y, Z. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Ben. Understanding how to grow a business, the realities of working within a business environment and growing that business, I think are really critical.
And also, I touch on mindset, and mindset can sometimes be like some over-discussed, and you hear about it a lot, but, mindset is important. Like, there's no surprise at all. Athletes, it's a core component of athletic training, because you have to have your mind in a really certain way in order to really perform at a high level. So I also talk a lot about mindset, because it's tough, right, Brady? Like, there's so many ups and downs, and it's volatile, right?
Absolutely. It can be a very big roller coaster ride, but the ups are fantastic. The downs aren't so fantastic, but it's a matter of, as Ben says, having the right mindset and keeping going and keeping focused, positive, and it all comes together. If you do the right things, you're going to be successful.
I think there's something certainly in all of us here and in many people out there where you feel that sort of call to step outside of what you're been comfortable with. It doesn't matter whether you're working in a corporate role or whether you're a tradesperson or working in fitness. I think we all know there's that calling within us, but it's quite fearful to actually have the courage to step forward. And as you say, it's the fear. It's not so much being drawn towards the highs, it's the fear of the lows. And I think understanding the requirements, so the basics of being in real estate, whether you're a sales agent or a buyer's agent, is one thing. But I think really understanding how to sort of smooth out the flows and really sort of avoid the lows through marketing, through networking, through really sort of putting in structure into customer service is really, really critical.
Absolutely. You're spot on with all of that. And I always say you've got to get uncomfortable to get comfortable.
Look, hey, I think the older you get, I'm 51 years old now. I stepped into my own business when I was in my late 30s, but I was afraid of doing that. But you know what? It has been the most rewarding thing that I could have done. I mean, I haven't quit the 9 to 5. I work many hours, but I work many hours because I choose to work many hours now, not because I'm forced to work many hours. I love what I do. I mean, I'm a different field to yourself, but I think it's really about stepping forward, understanding what you want and sort of fulfilling that gap in your life. And then if you choose to work, sort of 30, 40, 50 hours a week, hey, that's a choice, not an obligation.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty about being a buyer's agent and having your own business, because you can work as many hours as you like and you don't feel like it's a chore. It's like, yes, this is great. I'm building something and I'm getting somewhere.
Brady, one of the things I wanted to just go back into looking at your experience in sales and now as a buyer's agent. So what do you find are the similarities in terms of working with your customers from both those roles?
I think the similarities, well, I've always given my clients good customer service, whether they were a vendor or a potential buyer. And I think the similarities are that if you offer the same level of integrity and you are honest with the seller or the buyer, then you're going to get a result. And I think that the similarities are the understanding, first of all, of the market. So whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, you've got to understand the market. And then you also have to work out a strategy of how to get the deal over the line, whether you're selling the property or whether you're buying a property.
And I've been both a seller and a buyer. I've done more buying than selling, but you have different sets of anxieties in both sort of camps. When you're selling, you're sort of worried about the interest in the marketplace, whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. When you're buying, you're obviously hoping to get something for the lowest price with the best potential yield. What do you notice in terms of actually working with your clients now and sort of steering them through the similarities on both the buying and the selling side in terms of emotions?
There are similarities, but I think having a buyer's agent by your side, we take a lot of the emotion out of the equation. And so a buyer that has a buyer's agent feels a lot more confident moving forward, whereas when you had a buyer that was representing themselves, they were sometimes unsure of how the process went, and it was quite a daunting and emotional experience for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Good sales agents they are so good at what they do, and they operate very clearly on the side of the vendor. I think sometimes people that go into real estate as a buyer don't actually really understand about the relationship, but that's very clear cut. There is no confusion there. The vendor pays the fee, usually a commission base to the seller, and they operate in their best interest, and it's up to them to get the highest sale price possible. Buyer's agency, though, what I love about buyer's agency is you operate on behalf of the buyer, but there's no real sort of conflict, because you're very clear when you're dealing with vendors or with the agency that you are looking to get the price down as low as possible. Whereas with a sales agent, there is that sort of illusion of, hey, I'm operating on behalf of you, but I'm also, for you as the buyer, I need to get you up and reassure you that that you are getting a good deal. So it's very, very clear cut as a buyer's agent, and that's one of the things I love about it.
Correct. And I think that when we start working with our clients, we sit down and we understand exactly what their needs are, where they need to be, and what they've got to spend. So from day one, we have a very good understanding of where they want to be, and it's just a matter of going out there and achieving that for them.
So Ben, just looking at sort of, again, people who sort of approach you, and we sort of touched on the things that you to help sort of teach people in terms of the realities of being in business. What sort of traits have you noticed in the most successful buyer's agents that have gone through your course and sort of gone on to great things?
It might sound really simple, but I think it's all about execution. I think with business and with whatever you do, it's about how you execute and also the effort that you inject into things. And, one thing we can control is effort, and that leads then to execution. So the people that do really well, they're really unconditionally committed to just making it work, however they need to make it work. And they put so much effort into making it work, and it starts to work. The people that are kind of on the fence, and maybe, as you were saying earlier about the fear, there's so much fear when you're trying to transition out of a job or you leave your job. It's hard. It's really hard. So the people that haven't committed mentally that they're going to go all in, I feel like they typically find it really challenging. And also support network. The people that do really well have a really good level of support. They've got a lot of people around them. In my group, I hear them a lot saying, if it wasn't for my wife, if it wasn't for my two best mates or whatever, or wasn't for this community, I would have mentally tapped out. And I think it's so isolating doing and running a business, right? Like we've all been there, the three of us. It's tough, and there's sleepless nights. And so I think the support network is a massive one where people win. And I think just staying, mentally positive a lot.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And I cast my mind back to when I first went out in business. And one of the first things, doesn't matter what you go into, is really cash flow. So I think understanding that there's going to be initially a gap before you start transacting, start bringing the money in. So having that understanding, having a provision for that, and then seeing the vision of when the money starts to come in. So just looking at maybe going back to your early days when you joined Cohen Handler, can you give me an idea of sort of how quickly you start to actually sort of transact and start generating revenue for your business?
Sure. So I think if you apply the right attitude with hard work, within 3 months, you should start to see some results happening. And within 6 months, that's when you should be seeing the right commissions flowing through.
And let's look at this logically. So, for me as a buyer, I'm just going through my own journey as a buyer. So I will decide there is a decision that it's time for me to buy. I go away and I make sure I've got my finance ready. I have, as a buyer, I should have some sort of idea of what I want to buy. Now, I may not geographically know where I want to go, but working with my buyer's agent, I may say I want to spend $350,000 and it's got to be at least a 600 square meter block, and maybe there's got to be some scope to do, some sort of improvement. So I have a bit of a vision of what I want. My buyer's agent then sort of works with me. So there's obviously there is a time frame to, you obviously don't snap your fingers and find a property and settle in an immediate sense. So there's what would you say, anything between a 6 week to maybe a 10 week kind of,
yes,
in an ideal scenario type of a process?
Yep, I'd say 6 to 10 weeks, sometimes even 12 weeks, but generally speaking, 6 weeks.
6 weeks is pretty snappy.
Yeah.
All the stars are aligned if things are happening in 6 weeks. But I've done it before.
And it happens.
And the great thing with buyer's agents, for me as a buyer, so one of the things I love about having a buyer's agent is that they have their finger on the pulse and they have a network of agents. And this is the really exciting thing as a buyer, is you have a buyer's agent, they'll say, Alex, I've got a property because we know what you're looking for and it is ready today, this second. It is a distressed buyer. So, I've got my finance ready, I've got my deposit, can you move quickly? And that's for me as an investor, that's a really exciting thing. And you know what, when you decide to invest, it can't happen quick enough.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty about being a buyer's agent. You have access to all opportunities, whether they're off-market, pre-market, on-market. And when you start talking to buyers, prospective clients, you already know what's coming up, what they need to do to get to where they want to be. So you're already starting to work prior to them even getting their journey started.
So for you, having many years in sales, it's got to put you at a real advantage when you're talking to sales agents, because you're going to see through. And I think these are skills you can learn because, there are many buyers agents that haven't come from the sales side, but it gives you that sort of bit of an insight into when they're giving you a little bit of spin.
Exactly. So you get to know how particular agents work, what their strategies are. Some people would say what their games are. And then we can advise our clients accordingly with which way we're going to work with that particular agent. Again,
just sort of touching on what we sort of mentioned earlier, Ben, we sort of mentioned that the US market is very much based on a buyer and a seller's agent. Do you think that that's the way that we're going here in Australia?
I mean, the concept for Cohen Handler was born in California when I started to see that model. Where it won't work is in the States, the seller pays typically 5-6%.
Yeah.
And that gets divided. If there's a buyer's agent involved,
right.
2.5%.
It feels kind of conflicted in the States,
It is. It is.
Because without getting too bogged down overseas markets, but it feels like the buyer's agent is linked to a higher sale price. Whereas here in Australia, it's just win-win for the buyer because it's linked to, look, sometimes it's a commission, sometimes it's a flat fee, but it's really very much clear cut that the buyer's agent here works 100% in the best interest of the buyer.
Yeah, correct. And so exactly right. And I don't think it's going to get like the States because our comms or real estate agents charge 2%. In this market, they're probably charging average 1.6. So to split that. But where I do think it's going is what Brady's doing, right? It's where the real estate sell-side firms will have separate divisions, like separate. Well, they have buyer's advisory within their groups. And there can be cross-referrals. They can service buyers that don't want to work with real estate agents anymore, etc. So I think that's where I really see it going.
So Brady, are you seeing, in terms of people who you are sort of building your network, your customers, how many of them are coming sort of via Belle and how many are sort of coming organically from sort of referrals and so forth?
So I'd say at the moment it's about 60-40, 60% from my networks, 40% from Belle. And I think the important thing for the buyers and the sellers out there also to understand is that although we are with Belle, doesn't mean to say that we have to buy Belle properties. So,
well, you said that it's very rare you actually buy from Belle, but it's about the right property for the buyer.
Absolutely, that's it. So that's the benefit. So we have the access to the Belle opportunities and then all the other agencies. And
for the customers that are coming your way, what sort of split are you seeing between investors and owner-occupiers or sort of first-time buyers?
So at the moment, there's a lot of investors because of the upcoming election and people not knowing which way things are going to go.
Got to pack them away before you...
Yeah. But having said that, there's still always a lot of primary residence buyers. So it would be 50-50 at the moment.
And just looking at your particular business model, and there are many different segments of the market the buyer's agents cater for. Some, operate. I like cheap properties with in certain areas, but that's my particular profile. What do you specialize in? Do you operate in different kind of market segments, or do you tend to specialize in one particular area? In terms of, sort of the high-end market, the middle ground, or sort of the cheaper end, where do you find that most of your customers sit?
So my customers sit from first home buyers to the high-end market, expats. There's a lot of expats that I work with. So I would say that it's across the board between investors and primary residents as well. So there's not one specific market. I do some commercial as well.
Okay.
So it just depends on the client's brief.
So is that a new area that you've gone into? Have you always sort of operate a little way in the commercial market?
It's a newer area that I've gone into.
Okay. I haven't invested personally into commercial real estate, but I know that it's a different structure. It's a good hedge against against residential markets, because they move in a different sort of tempo to residential markets. So that's a really interesting area to move into. Ben, in terms of again, people that you're seeing coming through, what sort of focal point do you see above and beyond wanting to move into the industry and set up their own business? But do you help agents look at the commercial market, or do you really sort of focus mainly on residential?
It's primarily resi. For me, in the Institute, it's primarily investors, I would say. I think be a good owner-occupier buyer's agent like Brady is. I mean, Brady's phenomenal in that space. It's an acquired skill. You're not dealing with numbers. You're dealing with humans and emotion. And, one of the partners or the spouses might not want to buy it because the backyard's facing southwest and fully not south or something. There's little things, and that can irritate a lot of people. So it's an acquired taste and skill. So the majority of my people, they love property. They own a lot of property, a lot of them, and they just want to now convert that into buying property. So a lot of them are, really strong investors.
I think this is a really interesting market phase that we're moving into now, because it is a buyer's market. Now, you can take that as you will. However, there is still not a huge amount of stock on market, because just given the kind of the current climate with interest rates still being very low, you've still got a lot of would-be sellers that are sort of sitting on their property, because we all know that, and for me as a property owner, I always think my property is worth 10% more than it really is, so I think for investors and for buyers agents right now and you're going to have a market cycle for certainly a number of years where, although it's a slower market, I think having that insight into exactly what stock is worth buying, because you can make wrong decisions based on what you think is out there, based on the sort of the price. So what are your thoughts in terms of sort of the dynamics for the next foreseeable future in terms of the sales market?
Yeah, I mean, rewind like 3 years ago when it was a seller's market in Sydney, primarily when we were operating in Sydney. It was a tough time for buyers agents. I mean, everyone used to say, "Oh, you're killing it and things must be so good." I mean, no, it's a great market for real estate agents. They list a good property, it just sells.
Yeah.
All they have to do is pick up their phone, basically. So now it's transitioning into a buyer's market. Would I say it's a full buyer's market? No, but I think it's moving more towards the buying side. I think it's a phenomenal time to become a buyer's agent. Once you've got the client, it's easier to buy. So I definitely see it staying more in a buyer's agent or buyer's market. I do hope rates go up a bit. I just think it's going to cause a bit of a shake-up.
Yeah.
And I think that I would like to see that, but I mean, talk from what I'm hearing and seeing is it might go down. But I think that for buyer's agents, we've got a really good, I personally think like another 5 to 7 years of some really good times.
I think so. And I think one of the great things about real estate, Brady, as you'd know, is it isn't just one market. And I think so often, we talk about the property market, but there are many property markets. There are many Sydney property markets, let alone statewide or Australia-wide. So I think opportunities are abound. And the great thing about, again, being a buyer's agent is you're not limited to any one area. You're really committed to your client and understanding what they need, and you can help them. Look, they may want to buy if they're an owner-occupier in a particular area, in which case, you can really help ensure they get the best buy. But if they're an investor, you know what they're looking to buy, you're not limited.
Absolutely. I think it's a very exciting time now to become a buyer's agent. And I think that from a perspective of people wanting to sell, although they're sitting on the fence, there are still a lot of off-market opportunities out there, which is a very big benefit to buyer's agents. So that's one of the attractions for people signing up with buyer's agents. So I think the next 3 to 5 years is going to be very exciting.
Just looking at where you are right now, so you started in April. How many do you have in your team now?
So there's 4 buyer's agents and 2 assistants.
That's fantastic. That's really fast growth in such a short period of time. And where are you hoping to take that over the next? What are your sort of plans over the next period of time?
So the plans are to grow the team, but not just to grow it with numbers, to grow the team with good quality buyer's agents and give people opportunities that really want to make a career out of being a buyer's agent.
And at the moment, you're North Shore based in Sydney. Do you plan to expand this network of your own agents sort of further for Belle Property?
So yes, the answer is yes to that. Although we're North Shore based, we do transact in the eastern suburbs, on the northern beaches, across Sydney. We transact.
Fantastic. Yeah. Brady, it's been wonderful catching up with you. I'm so grateful for your time. It's been a fantastic story from Optus to now buyer's agent over a period of years. Ben, always great to catch up.
Thank you.
Just any closing thoughts for people tuning in?
No, I just think, as we've all said, and Brady just mentioned, it's a remarkable and it's an incredible time to become a buyer's agent right now, and it's only going to become better. So I think if you are interested, you can visit the Buyers Agent Institute website at buyersagentinstitute.com.au and go from there.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been wonderful to be here today.
It's been fantastic. Look, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. Look, if you feel that sort of stirring within yourself, if you feel that you've got a calling, that you would like to have your own business, look, whatever that may be, look, do speak to Ben. Check out, the course that he offers and have a chat. He can help give you some guidance in terms of how you can shape your future. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch up with you next time.
Thanks for listening to Quit the 9 to 5 with Ben Handler. For more advice on turning property buying into your career, head to www.buyersagentinstitute.com.au now.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature, does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.